They stole your name in secret, not with chains or with guns, not with open violence, but in whispers, in manipulation, in the silent rewriting of your story when you weren't looking. They didn't tear the pages out of your book, they simply replaced your name in the margins and passed it off as truth. Chosen one. You have lived under borrowed labels, false identities, and narratives written by people who were threatened by your light before you even knew you had it. But here's what they never understood. Your name was never theirs to take. You came into this world already marked, not by man, but by the divine. Your name wasn't carved with ink, it was inscribed in fire. You were not an afterthought in the heavens. You were authored by eternity. And though they tried to erase you in the earthly realm, the spiritual realm still sings your name with power. You see, what most people don't understand about you, what even you may have doubted at times, is that your existence challenges the entire system. You don't follow the script. You don't conform to the expectations. And that's exactly why they tried to rename you. It wasn't personal to them, it was spiritual. They saw the difference, even if they couldn't name it. And so they tried to reduce you to something more manageable, something they could understand or control. They saw you coming, and instead of welcoming you, they went to work redefining you. From an early age, you may have felt it. That tension, that sense that others were treating you as a threat without cause. Maybe you were called rebellious when you were simply honest. Maybe they said you were too sensitive when you were just spiritually aware. Maybe they said you were difficult when really, you just couldn't fake it. The labels they gave you, too much, too weird, too emotional, were all just smoke screens to hide what they really feared, that you couldn't be contained. And let's talk about the weight of that. Chosen one. Because living under the wrong name, under someone else's description of who you are, can make you question your entire path. It makes you second-guess your instincts. It warps the mirror. You start to wonder, maybe I am the problem. But deep down, the fire never goes out. Even under layers of dust, even buried under years of shame, rejection, and misunderstanding, your real name never stopped burning. There's something sacred about your name, not just the letters or the sound of it, but what it carries. Names in the spiritual realm are declarations. They are identity. They are power. In ancient times, to know someone's true name was to hold influence over their soul. That's why your name was targeted. Not your personality, not your skills, your name. Because your name carries the frequency of your assignment, and your assignment was never meant to blend in. They tried to rename Joseph. Remember, threw him in a pit, sold him as a slave, and yet the dream in him couldn't die. They gave him a new title in Egypt, but heaven still called him Joseph, the dreamer, the deliverer. His brothers thought they could strip him of purpose by stripping him of favor. But even in captivity, God never stopped calling him by his original name. Just like Joseph, you were sent ahead. You didn't lose your name. You just had to walk through the places where it was least recognized. Not to be punished, but to be positioned. And every time someone tried to call you by something that wasn't yours, every time they called you a failure, a burden, a mistake, it only sharpened the contrast. It revealed what you were not, so you could awaken to what you are. This is why your life has been a battleground of identity. This is why people have tried to put you in your place. Because your very presence disrupts the narrative. You're not here to accept the version of you others wrote in fear. You're here to embody the version written in fire. And fire doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't check with the room before it burns. Fire consumes what isn't true. It clears what can't withstand the heat. And that's what's happening to your false identities now. They are falling away. You may have noticed it lately, old labels losing their grip. Old dynamics no longer holding you hostage. That's not coincidence. That's your divine name reclaiming you. The real you is stepping forward. And though it may feel unfamiliar, even frightening, it's also freeing. Because deep in your spirit, you always knew the roles they gave you didn't fit. You just didn't have the language for why, but now the fog is lifting. Now the veil is thinning. You are beginning to hear the name God calls you by not the name assigned by broken people with broken lenses, but the one spoken in the Spirit long before you were born. The one etched in the scrolls of heaven. The one that holds your blueprint, your frequency, your flame. And don't be surprised if the moment you start living in that truth, the world pushes back harder. Identity reclamation is a threat to every system built on illusion. But you weren't made to appease illusions. You were made to break them. And you don't need anyone's permission to carry your divine name into the world. You don't need applause, agreement, or validation to be who you were always meant to be. What you need is what you already have, the fire. The eternal imprint of a name no one can steal. And though they tried, they failed. Because God never consulted them when He created you. He never needed their signatures to authorize your existence. And the signature of God cannot be forged. You're walking into a season now where who you are will no longer be hidden behind who they said you were. The real you is rising, and not even the enemy can stop it. Because your name is not just remembered, it's ignited. They erased you because they feared you. Not because you did anything wrong, not because you were broken, not because you were unworthy, but because you carried something they could not explain and could never control. You were a disruption in a world built on predictable patterns. Your very presence called things into question. And when the world doesn't understand something, chosen one, it tries to contain it, or worse, conceal it. So they rewrote your story. They silenced your instincts. They labeled your uniqueness as rebellion. And little by little, they tried to convince you that your light was too much, your voice too loud, your knowing too strange. But the truth is, your frequency pierced through the illusion of their control. You reminded them of what they buried in themselves. And people who are running from their own truth often can't handle someone living in theirs. You might not realize it, but from the beginning, you carried a resonance that made others uncomfortable, not because you harmed them, but because you revealed them. Your silence made them confront their noise. Your stillness highlighted their chaos. Your questions exposed their shallow answers. So they painted you as the problem to avoid facing the mirror you held up to their soul. And here's the kicker, they didn't even always do it intentionally. Sometimes the enemy uses people unconsciously, hurt people, confused people, even well-meaning people. People who genuinely believe they're doing the right thing. But in their fear, they contributed to your erasure. They played a role in diminishing your identity, not out of hatred, but out of ignorance, out of discomfort, out of spiritual blindness. It's important to say this. Forgiving them doesn't mean forgetting what happened. It means reclaiming your power. Because the moment you understand why they did what they did, you stop internalizing it. You stop thinking you were the issue. And that's when the healing begins. You were never meant to fit in. And that was never a punishment. It was preparation. See? Those who carry a divine name don't blend into the background. They stand out, whether they want to or not. That's why you were often the scapegoat, the outsider, the one they talked about when you left the room. It's not because you failed to belong, it's because you belong to a different order altogether. You belong to the remnant, the few, the misunderstood, the anointed misfits who were never called to be part of the crowd, but to call the crowd to something higher. And in order to do that, you had to experience what it meant to be erased by that crowd, so you'd never seek validation from it again. Now let's dig deeper. Because this identity erasure didn't just show up in your childhood or social circles. It may have followed you into relationships, into churches, into workplaces, places where you thought you'd be seen. Instead, you were silenced. Places that were supposed to affirm your gift instead misinterpreted it. That's no accident. The system was never built to recognize your kind. That's why you felt like an imposter in rooms where everyone else seemed fine. Because you were never meant to emulate them. You were meant to elevate them. But they couldn't receive that. So they rejected you. And when they couldn't reject you outright, they tried to redefine you. Think back, how many times did someone try to tell you who you were or who you weren't? How many times were you told, "You're overreacting," when your spirit was simply discerning? How many times were you told to calm down? Be quiet. Stop asking so many questions when all you were doing was waking up. It wasn't that they didn't see something special in you. Quite the opposite. They saw it too clearly. They just didn't know what to do with it. So they boxed it, branded it, or buried it, and you, still in your process, may have believed them. But that belief is breaking now. The spell is lifting, because even though they erased your name in public, heaven preserved it in private. Even when you doubted your own worth, God never stopped calling you by your true name. That's why, even in your confusion, something inside you kept searching, kept aching, kept asking, is there more than this? That was your divine name speaking louder than the noise around you. And here's what you need to know. Chosen one. Your name is not a label. It's a legacy. It's the word heaven spoke before your first breath. The sound your spirit responds to, even when your mind is full of doubt. That name holds authority. It carries an assignment. And that's exactly why the enemy wanted to silence it. But no counterfeit name can survive the fire of truth. The masks they gave you are melting off. The false identities are being exposed. And the world is about to meet the version of you they never saw coming. The version that doesn't need approval to walk in purpose. The version that doesn't shrink to make others feel comfortable. The version that remembers they tried to erase you. But you were never written in ink. You were written in fire. So now you rise. Not as someone seeking recognition, but as someone reclaiming revelation. You don't need them to get it. You just need to keep going. Because the same people who misunderstood you are going to witness your emergence. And the best part, you won't have to say a word. Your presence will preach what your voice never had the chance to. This is the shift. chosen one, the turning of the tide. You're stepping out of the narrative they wrote and into the one heaven has been guarding all along. You're not just being seen, you're being restored. And no amount of earthly rewriting can override what God has spoken. There are records man can edit, but then there are records sealed in the archives of heaven. Chosen one, while they scribbled out your name on earth. Heaven was writing it in flame across scrolls no hand can tamper with. You may not have seen the evidence yet. You may have felt forgotten, overlooked, even erased. But in the spirit, your name has never stopped echoing. Every time you spoke truth when it cost you everything. Every time you loved when others hated. Every time you refused to bow to the false idols of this world. Your name was being written again, not in ink, but in fire. Eternal, untouchable, divine fire. There's something holy about fire. Isn't there? It consumes what's false and purifies what's true. And that's exactly how your identity has been handled by the Most High. While man wrote over you with their assumptions, heaven ignited your name with your calling. That's why the old version of you couldn't stay. That's why certain relationships ended the moment you stepped into your truth. Because the fire revealed what was real and what wasn't. You may not realize it, but this fire has been following you your entire life. Just like the pillar of fire that guided the Israelites through the wilderness. Your divine name has always been a torch, lighting the path even when you walked alone. When they turned their backs, when you were misunderstood, when you questioned your own worth, it was still there. Heaven's record never changes based on man's opinion. And here's what's wild. God doesn't need to rewrite what was already finished. He's not scrambling to fix your narrative. He authored it from the beginning. What they tried to delete was never in their power to undo. That's why, despite everything, you keep rising. They can't explain it. You shouldn't be standing, let alone shining. But the fire inside you answers to something greater than logic. Remember this, there's a difference between what man says about you and what God knows about you. People saw your past, your missteps, your silence, and assumed you had nothing to offer. But God saw your heart, your intention, your spiritual DNA. And while man was busy defining you by the chapter they walked in on, heaven was holding the whole book. The real book. And that book, your divine scroll, carries your name on every page. Not the version shaped by trauma, but the version shaped by truth. The version that existed before the pain, before the betrayal, before the rejection. That's the name God calls when He speaks to you in dreams. That's the name that activates your gifts. That's the name demons recognize when you walk into a room. That's the name the enemy has been trying to suppress since your first breath. Have you ever wondered why things seem to attack you earlier than most? Why your battles started young? It's because your name was already known in the spirit realm. Before you knew who you were, darkness recognized you as a threat. So the attacks came early. The confusion, the mislabeling, the gaslighting, it wasn't random. It was coordinated. Because hell doesn't waste resources on people who aren't dangerous to its plans. But here's the part that'll set your soul on fire. Your name still stood. With every storm, with every loss, with every betrayal, your name in heaven never flinched. And now, chosen one, you're entering the season where what was written in fire will be revealed in the natural. You're not just going to feel it in your spirit, you're going to see it in your life. Opportunities will open that have no earthly explanation. Doors will swing wide because your name was on them all along. Not the name they gave you. The name God wrote in His fire. The name that holds your true identity. The one that can't be copied, faked, or stolen. And the ones who tried to wear your crown are about to realize it never fit them because it was never theirs. Let's bring this to life with a story you know, but perhaps have never heard quite like this Daniel. Thrown into a den of lions, not because he was a criminal, but because his identity threatened the order. They tried to change his name, called him Belteshazzar, gave him new clothes, new rules, new language. But Daniel never forgot who he was. And when he prayed, when he aligned with the name heaven had given him, he survived what no one else could. The lions didn't touch him, not because of earthly protection, but because the Spirit recognized the authority on his name. That's what you carry. Chosen one. Not just favor, authority. You can be dropped into the mouth of chaos and still remain untouched, not because you're special in the eyes of men, but because you are marked in the archives of heaven. And that mark burns brighter the more they try to hide it. You may not wear robes. You may not sit on a throne. But make no mistake, your name is royal. Not by bloodline, but by divine lineage. You are part of a spiritual remnant whose names were known before time began. And the more you remember that, the less you'll chase after earthly titles that mean nothing in eternity. So stop questioning your worth based on who sees you now. Stop measuring your impact by who claps for you. The scrolls are not visible to the public. They're held by the one who sees all, and He has never forgotten your name. In fact, He's been waiting for you to reclaim it. Because the truth is, you don't need to invent who you are. You just need to remember. And once you do, once you operate from that sacred identity, the world around you will adjust. Not because you demanded it, but because your presence will command it. That's the power of a name written in fire. It doesn't flicker. It doesn't fade. It consumes everything that isn't aligned. And what remains is the version of you God always intended. None of the battles you faced were random. They were not freak accidents or spiritual coincidences. No. Chosen one, they were strategic. Every attack on your character, every betrayal, every manipulation or attempt to twist your words. It was all a coordinated effort to keep you disconnected from the power of your true name. Because if you ever remembered who you really are, if you ever reclaimed the name heaven calls you by, you would become unstoppable. And the enemy knows that. You've lived through sabotage, not because you were weak, but because you were born to carry spiritual authority. And authority is dangerous in the wrong hands. So from a young age, there were people, sometimes even family, who tried to mold you into someone more acceptable, someone easier to manage. But every mold they tried to force on you cracked under the weight of your calling. Because your soul could never conform to something that wasn't aligned with your truth. That's why the opposition seemed to come in waves, almost always after moments when you were about to rise. Have you noticed that? Just when you started to feel a shift, a sense of clarity or confidence, something hit. A betrayal? A loss. A misunderstanding that left you questioning everything. But that wasn't random. Chosen one. It was designed to interrupt the awakening of your identity. Spiritual warfare rarely looks like flames and demons. Sometimes, it looks like people you trusted turning cold. Sometimes it looks like being left out, lied on, or overlooked for something you were perfectly qualified for. It looks like silence in a room full of noise. It looks like confusion when you know in your bones what is true. The enemy is crafty. If he can't destroy you outright, he will try to distort your reflection. But you must understand this now, and their confusion about you is not your responsibility. You were never meant to be understood by everyone. You were meant to be revealed to the right ones, and most of all, to yourself. Because this war has always been about your awareness. If you don't know who you are, you'll settle for what they tell you. And that's the trap: identity amnesia. That's why you were surrounded by people who constantly misunderstood you. It was meant to make you doubt what you knew deep down, and yet you survived. Let's pause here for a second, because that's something to honor. You are still here, still breathing, still searching for truth, still reclaiming your voice. After all that alone is proof of your anointing. You weren't just chosen, you were preserved. And even if you didn't know it, heaven was intervening behind the scenes every time someone tried to completely erase you. You remember Esther, don't you? She was chosen for royalty, but they hid her identity too. Told her to keep her heritage quiet, to blend in, to be invisible until it was safe. But when the moment of destiny came, she had to speak her truth. And that truth saved a nation. Had she kept silent, had she stayed in hiding, the scrolls would have missed her voice. That's what the enemy wants from you: your silence, your shrinking, your suppression. Because your voice has the power to shift things in the atmosphere. This is why your name was under attack. It's not just a name, it's a sound wave in the spirit. It's a vibration that carries divine codes. When you speak from your true self, from that sacred space of awareness, things move, chains break, people awaken, systems tremble, and darkness cannot survive that kind of light. So what did they do instead? They tried to convince you your presence was a problem, that your fire was too hot, that your discernment was paranoia. They branded your spiritual sensitivity as drama. And for a time, maybe you believed them. Maybe you tried to tone it down, to make yourself more palatable. But what did that ever do but drain you? You cannot water down what was created to burn. You cannot fit divine fire into earthly molds. And you were never meant to. That's why your life has been a series of awakenings, waves of remembrance that call you deeper, higher, clearer. Every time you thought you were losing something, you were actually shedding another false label, another borrowed identity, another limitation they placed on your name. And now, you've reached a turning point, a divine pivot. You're not just aware of the war, you're aware of the strategy behind it. And that changes everything. Because now you can stop reacting and start reclaiming. You can begin to walk, speak, and choose like someone who knows their name is written in fire. And let me tell you, when you do, everything shifts. People who once dismissed you start to watch you. Environments that once rejected you begin to feel uncomfortable around you. Not because you're doing anything different, but because you're finally aligned. You're finally operating from the place they tried to bury. And that light makes the shadows squirm, but don't be afraid of the discomfort your name causes. Don't shrink when the fire of your presence reveals what others wanted to keep hidden. That's not your guilt to carry. That's confirmation. Because the truth is, if you are still under attack, it means your name still threatens the system that tried to erase you. You are not forgotten. You are not lost. You are not behind. You are awakening. And the enemy's greatest fear is that you will wake up fully, speak from your fire, and walk into every room like it already belongs to you. Because spiritually, it does. This is the beginning of the return of your true identity, the return of divine remembrance, the return of power they said you'd never find again. And the fire is only getting stronger. Chosen one. Do you know why your story feels so heavy sometimes? Why you walk through life carrying a weight you can't always explain? It's because you carry a name that doesn't just identify you. It calls nations into alignment. Your name, the one heaven gave you before time began, is not just a title. It is a frequency that shakes foundations. And like Moses, your calling was forged in isolation long before anyone recognized your leadership. Look at Moses for a moment, not the icon, not the myth, but the man. Born into a system that wanted him dead before he could even walk. Raised in a palace that didn't reflect his true identity. He was given a name by Pharaoh's daughter. But heaven had already named him Deliverer. And isn't that what happened to you too? They gave you names that didn't fit, called you misfit. Too deep, too emotional, too intense. They tried to clothe you in identities that looked good from the outside, but never felt right on the inside. Moses fled into the wilderness after defending someone with justice in his heart. He thought he had failed. He thought he had ruined everything. But it was in the wilderness that God spoke his true name. It was in that solitude that the fire showed up not to burn him, but to awaken him. And chosen one. The same fire that called Moses from a burning bush is the same fire that has been calling you. That voice that keeps tugging at your spirit. Even when the world is silent, that's not your imagination. That's heaven calling you by the name they tried to bury. That's the divine reigniting your memory. And like Moses, you've questioned it. You've asked, who am I to speak? Who am I to lead? But the calling has never been about your qualification. It's always been about your identity. And identity doesn't come from man, it comes from the source. You were forged for this, not in comfort, but in contradiction. In the places where you felt like a stranger, where nothing made sense. Where the rejection stung so deep it echoed in your bones, that was your wilderness. But here's the paradox, the wilderness wasn't punishment. It was preparation. Because the ones with the heaviest callings often walk through the longest silence before their name is revealed. And just like Moses, you were misunderstood by those closest to you. Remember how even his own people didn't believe him at first. That's the weight of being chosen. Your clarity will often sound like confusion to others. Your awakening will irritate those still sleeping. And your truth will threaten those who have built their lives around lies. But still, your fire burns. There's something sacred about how you kept going, even when you didn't know why. Something holy about how you stayed sensitive in a world that demanded hardness. Something powerful about how you kept showing up even when you felt invisible. That's what separates the anointed from the average. You didn't give up when the fire got hot, you learned how to carry it. Let's not overlook what that fire really is. It's not just passion or talent. It's revelation. It's divine DNA. It's the echo of your name every time you step into alignment. And that's why the enemy works overtime to keep you distracted. Because a chosen one walking in revelation is a force no darkness can contain. The thing is, Moses didn't look like a deliverer. Not to Pharaoh, not to the Israelites, not even to himself. But heaven had the final word. And so do you. You don't have to look the part. You are the part. And the fire inside of you will prove it when the time is right. Not with noise, not with fanfare, but with fruit. Because real authority doesn't need to announce itself, it reveals itself through impact. And here's something you need to hear. The wilderness didn't waste you. It refined you. The hidden years weren't void, they were sacred. Every moment you spent questioning, searching, rebuilding, that was the formation of someone who won't be swayed by public opinion. That was the construction of a voice that cannot be hijacked. And just like Moses, you've been called to lead people out of systems, out of confusion, out of bondage, out of illusion. But first, you had to lead yourself. Out of their labels, out of the fake names they gave you, out of the boxes they tried to put you in. Because how can you lead anyone into freedom if you're still bound by what they said you were? So now, chosen one, the staff is in your hand. You may not realize it, but the authority is already yours. The fire is lit. And like Moses, you will soon return to the place that once rejected you this time. Not to plead for your identity, but to walk in it. Not to prove yourself, but to carry out your assignment. Let them talk. Let them wonder. Let them question. Because this isn't about being accepted, it's about being activated. You weren't created to blend in with the crowd. You were born to carry the sound of deliverance in your bones. And that sound starts with your name. You are not who they said you were. You are not the role they handed you. You are not the mistake, the black sheep, the outcast. You are a deliverer, a disruptor, a vessel of divine fire. And just like Moses, you were called before you were conscious of it. The fire isn't coming. Chosen one. It's been here all along. And now it's your time to burn. Now let's talk about something many won't admit. But you've lived through in silence. The theft of your identity wasn't just spiritual. It became personal. They didn't just try to silence you. They profited off of you. They watched you bleed truth, watched you give from a pure place, and then turned around and wore your essence like a costume. They mimicked your fire but lacked the burn. They repeated your words without carrying your weight. They observed your power in silence, only to imitate your light in public. But what they forgot is this: you can wear the robe, but you can't fake the anointing. Chosen one. You've seen this up close. Friends, mentors, lovers, people who studied your movement like a script, only to turn around and act as if the light originated from them. You shared freely, trusting that spiritual family would honor what came from your soul. But instead, some of them took your sacred and turned it into spectacle. They rebranded your pain, repackaged your wisdom, quoted your language, but cut you out of the room. That wound is real. That betrayal, unspoken as it may be, is the reason your heart still flinches in spaces where you should feel safe. But hear this clearly: they can borrow your words, but they can never carry your oil. Because what came from you wasn't just insight, it was birthed in warfare. It was harvested in prayer. It was shaped in the dark where no one was clapping, where no spotlight warmed your face, where only God saw what it cost. They want the crown without the crushing, the revelation without the refining. But heaven is not fooled by borrowed fire. There's a reason fakes don't last. The imitation always fades. The costume always slips. And when it does, what's left is the empty shell of someone trying to recreate a power they never earned. You're the original, the source, the vessel God chose. Not because you were perfect, but because you were willing. And when you speak, even in your quietest moments, it carries weight that can't be manufactured. That's why you feel it in your bones when someone parrots your voice but lacks your integrity. You're not imagining that. It's spiritual discernment. Your spirit knows the difference between imitation and incarnation. One mimics the sound. The other is the sound. And isn't it interesting? The same people who copied you never affirmed you. They studied you, but never supported you. They pulled from your well, but never poured back in. That's because they didn't love you. They loved what they could take from you. And that's a hard truth to swallow. But it's also freeing, because it shows you just how powerful your essence really is. Powerful enough that even your enemies tried to wear it. Powerful enough that your silence still echoes louder than their noise. Powerful enough that people tried to extract your identity and market it as their own. But chosen one, let me remind you, the power is not in the performance. It's in the presence. And presence can't be stolen. Presence comes from God. It is infused in your frequency. It is the residue of your obedience, the evidence of your endurance, the fruit of your fire. You are not replaceable. You are not mass-produced. You are a one-of-one creation. A blueprint? That's why they mimic you, because even they know there's something in you that cannot be copied. And even if they try, the Spirit won't back it. The miracles won't follow them. The fruit won't sustain them. Because only the authentic can carry that kind of oil. Think of David. A shepherd boy, overlooked, forgotten. But when it came time to fight Goliath, Saul tried to give David his armor. Sounds noble, right? But that armor didn't fit. David couldn't move in someone else's design. He had to go to war as himself, with his own name, with the tools shaped in the wilderness. And when he did, giants fell. The same is true for you. You can't wear someone else's identity, and no one else can wear yours. That's why your journey was custom. That's why your pain was precise. Because your calling is carved from who you really are. And even though they tried to take it, it didn't stick. What's more, the ones who stole from you, they're about to witness something they never expected: your return. Not angry, not bitter, but bold, clear, aligned. They'll watch as the fire they mocked becomes the flame that lights nations. They'll hear the voice they once dismissed thunder across the atmosphere with divine clarity. But here's the beauty in all of it. You don't need revenge. You don't need to expose them. Because exposure comes naturally when the counterfeit stands next to the real. Your authenticity will do the talking. Your fruit will do the revealing. And your fire, your fire will do the testifying. So let them talk. Let them mimic. Let them try to reproduce what only God can authorize. While they imitate, you elevate. While they copy, you become. Because there is no substitute for the name written in fire. And that name, your name, still carries the oil, still holds the authority, still rings with power in both realms. You're not just a vessel. You are the original manuscript, heaven's handwritten message to the earth, and nothing they've taken can strip that from you. The scroll of your life was not handed to man for editing. Heaven authored it, sealed it, and placed your name on the cover in letters forged from eternal flame. And yet, chosen one, while you've walked quietly, others have been loud in your place, loud with assumptions, loud with opinions, loud with projections that never aligned with your essence. But here's what's shifting now. Heaven is not just remembering your name. Heaven is revealing it. And when heaven reveals something, no one can cover it up again. The reckoning is personal. Not in the sense of vengeance, but in divine justice. There is a holy recalibration happening. The scales are tipping back into balance. What was stolen in the shadows is being restored in the light. The ones who distorted your image will now have to witness your unveiling not from behind closed doors, but out in the open. And not because you forced it. Not because you demanded a platform, but because God called your name again. And when God calls your name, chosen one, creation responds. You've lived too long in the background of your own story, always giving, always adjusting, always downplaying your fire so others could feel more comfortable. But the season of invisibility is closing. The era of erasure is ending. You are stepping into a moment where everything that was stolen, your voice, your influence, your identity is returning with interest. This is not ego. This is alignment. Because what most people fail to understand is that heaven's justice doesn't just restore what was lost, it multiplies it. And the restoration that's coming to you isn't about vanity or recognition. It's about truth. About the real being seen after so many years of impersonation. It's about the divine record being made manifest in the natural realm. Remember Joseph. The brothers who sold him had to stand before him in a famine, not knowing the very one they discarded was now their only source of survival. But Joseph didn't retaliate. He didn't gloat. He understood the deeper revelation. What you meant for evil, God meant for good. And that's the posture of the true chosen one. Because you weren't just chosen to rise, you were chosen to redeem. But that redemption doesn't come through silence anymore. It doesn't come through hiding. It comes through standing in your full authority. Not the watered-down version they trained you to perform. The real you. The fire-born you. The version of you that hears the voice of God louder than the voices of shame, rejection, or fear. The reckoning is not just external. It's internal. It's the moment you stop shrinking. The moment you stop explaining your glow. The moment you stop negotiating your worth. You were never too much. They were just too small to hold the immensity of your calling. And now you walk differently. Not with arrogance, but with awareness. You carry yourself like someone who's been through the fire and came out without the smell of smoke. Because that's exactly what you are. A walking contradiction. A divine anomaly. Proof that what they buried was never dead, just hidden for a season. Your name is a key. Chosen one. A spiritual access point. It opens doors no man can shut. It unlocks realms no human approval could ever enter. That's why it was targeted. That's why they tried to erase it, twist it, ignore it. Because deep down, even your enemies sense the authority on your name. And now, the tables are turning. Not with chaos, not with drama, but with divine precision. What once was used against you will now work for you. What was spoken in slander will now become a stage. What was meant to silence you will now serve to amplify your reach. Let them see it. Let them witness it. Not because you need their validation, but because God is writing a story that even your doubters will have to read. And they will read it with astonishment. Because nothing about your life makes sense without the lens of the Spirit. Nothing about your rise can be explained through earthly metrics. You've carried burdens no one saw, endured heartbreaks no one acknowledged. Yet here you are whole, wiser, radiant. That's divine justice. That's the hand of God honoring what was hidden. And the same God who wrote your name in fire is now breathing on it again. This is your unveiling. The time has come where your private obedience becomes public confirmation, where the prayers you whispered become the promises you walk in, where those who tried to impersonate your light now must contend with your presence, and not out of competition, but out of reverence. Because heaven is about to show them the real you. So let the reckoning come. Let the revealing begin. You don't have to lift a finger, just keep standing, keep burning, keep walking in the name they tried to erase. Because that name is laced with oil. And oil doesn't lie. You were not forgotten. You were not replaced. You were preserved. And now it's time for the world to meet what only God could create. You've walked through the shadows. Chosen one. Not just around you, but within you. There were moments when you questioned if the voice you once trusted had gone silent. Moments when you stood in front of the mirror and wondered, who am I now? Not because you didn't know, but because so many others tried to tell you otherwise. They named you things you never agreed to. They labeled your silence as weakness, your discernment as delusion, your sensitivity as fragility. But in all their efforts to rename you, they missed the one unshakable truth: your name was never written in flesh. It was written in fire. And what is written in fire cannot be erased by hands of dust. You see, the world has always had a habit of labeling people by their wounds. But heaven calls you by your purpose. People looked at your story and saw broken chapters. God looked and saw burning scrolls. People saw your pause and assumed you were finished. God saw your stillness as sacred, a moment of divine recalibration. And now, the time has come not to introduce a new version of you, but to remember the original one, the name heaven whispered before your first breath. This is the divine reversal, the return to the beginning, the reclamation of everything they said you'd never be. But this time, it won't be out of striving. It won't be out of proving. It will flow from knowing who you are, knowing what you carry, knowing who sent you. Because there's a moment in every chosen one's journey when the disguises fall away, when the noise quiets, when the mirrors that others held up shatter and you finally see your reflection in the eyes of the one who made you. Not distorted, not reduced, not filtered through their fears, but pure, holy, radiant with divine design. And this is that moment for you. Everything that felt like a detour was actually a breadcrumb. Every delay was a setup. Every rejection was a redirection toward truth. You were never meant to live by borrowed labels. You were meant to carry a name that shakes realms. And now, it is speaking louder than ever. So when they ask you, Where have you been? You'll answer with your presence. You'll walk into rooms that once ignored you, not to be seen, but to become. You'll speak in places that once silenced you, not to perform, but to pierce. You'll build what they thought they'd stolen. You'll birth what they said you were never worthy of. Not out of vengeance, but out of vindication. Because when heaven writes your name, it does not just give you identity, it gives you inheritance. And that inheritance is rising now. Through your voice, through your choices, through your very presence. And every force that tried to erase you is about to witness your emergence. You are not rising in spite of the fire, you are rising because of it. The fire revealed what was true. It burned away what never belonged. And now what remains is the indestructible version of you. The one who knows that names given by people can be taken, but names given by God live forever. Chosen one, you don't have to prove anything. You are the proof of resilience, of calling, of anointing, of divine design. And so, here we are, at the edge of your unveiling. The name they tried to bury is now becoming a banner. The truth they tried to silence is becoming a sound. The identity they tried to steal is returning home. And you are stepping into what was always yours. Let the fire write it. Let heaven speak it. Let the earth watch it. Because your name is not forgotten. It is inscribed in fire. And now, chosen one, let every word settle into your spirit like rain on dry soil. Let every doubt you once carried fall away under the weight of this truth. Your name is not fragile. It is eternal. It has survived what should have crushed you. It has withstood silence, betrayal, and delay. And still, it speaks. Still, it stands. Still, it burns. Breathe that in. You were not forgotten. You were not passed over. You were preserved. And heaven has been holding space for this exact moment, not just to affirm you, but to activate you. There is no more room for shrinking, no more room for apology. You were never created to walk small in spaces heaven designed you to fill. So now, in the stillness of your heart, receive this. You are seen. You are known. You are loved beyond measure. The fire on your name is not a threat. It is your confirmation. It is your covering. It is your call. Go forward from this moment with confidence, not in who people say you are, but in who God already declared you to be. Let that truth echo in your decisions. Let it rise in your voice. Let it walk ahead of you like a consuming flame. And wherever you go, carry this certainty. Your name is not up for debate. It is settled. It is sacred. It is sealed. You were called. You were chosen. You are marked for such a time as this. Now go, speak, rise, build. You don't need permission to be who God already wrote you to be. He wrote it in fire. He wrote it forever. God bless you.